another world is possible if we come together to understand the power we've got and achieve that decent, better society where everyone matters. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm proud to be here. Thank you very much, Glastonbury.
From the highs of Glastonbury's pyramid stage, just 2 years later, Jeremy Corbyn was forced to stand down as Labour leader following a crushing election defeat. The man that replaced him, though, was keen to keep him and his left-wing support base on side.
Jeremy Corbyn made our party the party of anti-austerity, and he was right to do so.
Now, Keir Starmer says Jeremy Corbyn is not even fit to be a Labour MP. He's now barred from standing for the party at the next general election, and he doesn't seem very happy about it.
It'll take 10 seconds.
Come and listen to what I have to say.
Can I just ask you for...
I look forward to seeing you over there. Thank you very much.
I just want to talk to you for 10 seconds about your future as a Labour MP.
Thank you very much.
We're not offering any comment on this time, sorry.
I'm Liz Bates, and on today's Sky News Daily, I'm in Westminster, asking how Jeremy Corbyn came to be kicked out of the parliamentary party for good after 40 years as Labour's MP for Islington North. It all happened in just a matter of hours at Labour's headquarters in central London, in a meeting of the party's ruling body, the NEC. I was hanging around outside with the other journalists, in the rain, waiting to find out what was going on. Luke Akehurst, part of Labour First, a faction of the party as far away from Jeremy Corbyn as it's possible to be, is a member of the NEC, and he was inside that room.
This was a motion proposed by Keir Starmer, and it proposed that we shouldn't endorse Jeremy Corbyn as a Labour parliamentary candidate. And really, we've had to go for this mechanism because the question of whether Jeremy is a Labour MP or not has sat there unresolved for 2.5 years.
OK, so just explain that, because Jeremy Corbyn is a member of the Labour Party and an MP, but he's not a Labour MP, right? And this vote has basically said that he won't be able to become a Labour MP again in the future.
After the Equalities and Human Rights Council issued its report on Labour anti-semitism, Jeremy issued his own statement which suggested that the problems of anti-semitism under his leadership, that the scale of it had been exaggerated, and he therefore had the parliamentary whip removed, so he wasn't a Labour MP, and was asked to do some really quite simple things, just to apologise, to say that he was in favour of implementing all of the report's recommendations, and to remove a Facebook post with a statement on it. And 2.5 years later, hadn't done any of those things, so we needed to resolve this, because if we didn't resolve it this week, it could have just dragged on and on and on, and we would have had to take the same decision just as a general election was called, which would clearly be a massive distraction from all the other things you need to do when a general election is up and going.
A lot has been made of Jeremy Corbyn's reaction to that report. Is this really about something else, which is that the party is acknowledging, actually, that Jeremy Corbyn was one of the main reasons for the 2019 general election loss, and you desperately want those voters back? And this is Keir Starmer saying to those voters, this sort of section of Labour history under Jeremy Corbyn is over, it's dead.
Well, it's both those things. So the motion was worded more widely to talk about the impact on Labour's electability. And you're right that I've had candidates in key marginal seats say to me that it comes up on the doorstep, a fear that the Corbynites are kind of still around and they could make a comeback. And has Labour really moved on as decisively as I believe that it has, and Keir Starmer says that it has? But anti-Semitism was a major component of that. And I think it went far wider than the Jewish community. I think anyone that kind of cared about decency in politics was put off by it. But if Jeremy hadn't have spoken the way that he did on the day of the EHRC report, I don't think that the party would be in any position to take any of this kind of action. He would have been there. He would have been an inconvenient reminder of a period in the past where we became very unpopular, But I suspect he would have stayed on as a Labour MP and been a candidate at the next election. The culpability, at the end of the day, from not being a Labour candidate sits with him.
Does this show a ruthless side to Keir Starmer?
I think it shows a decisive side, and a side that's not going to be held hostage by people from Labour's recent past who might want to hold us back.
I have to say I've noticed in the way that this has all played out some real unsentimentality around Jeremy Corbyn. He has served as a Labour MP for 40 years. He's dedicated his life to the Labour Party, and yet there's no thank you for your service, or it doesn't seem like there's really even been any personal conversations between him and Keir Starmer. It's just see you later and don't let the door hit you on the way out.
People that are on Jeremy's side of the party have made a lot of the change of tone between the kind of things that Keir said about Jeremy immediately after he took over as leader or during the election campaign to become leader and where we've got to now. And I have to say, I don't think the fault in that lies with Keir. I think Keir instinctively did want to show a bit of respect to someone that had been the party leader before him, who, as you say, people don't have a problem with Jeremy Corbyn on the level of a person. That's one of the reasons why he got to be leader, because MPs who didn't agree with him nominated him because they liked him as a person. But so the initial approach from Keir was very much to try not to be confrontational with the previous leadership or its supporters, to try to find common ground, to try to kind of bind the wounds and reunite the party. They tried to do that, and what we could broadly call the Corbynites immediately began to undermine them. And so he's had to kind of get tough with them, because you can't have a leader that's not in control of the party. He's got to demonstrate to the electorate and to the membership that if he's elected as leader, Keir's got to lead, and he's got to take the party in the direction that he thinks is the right one for the country and the right one to get us back into power.
OK, but the local party, his constituency in Islington North, say they do want him as their candidate.
Well, we don't know that. The CLP officers have issued a statement saying they want him, but there was never a selection process. Yeah, I suspect Islington North Labour Party has got similar politics to the rest of the constituency parties in inner London, which is quite volatile and tends to follow whatever the current kind of pattern in the wider party is. So I'm not saying he's not popular.
The point is, look, you haven't given them a choice.
We would always prefer that members get to choose, but we also have to have standards about candidates. So that is through due diligence on new candidates, where we look at all of their previous record and check whether there's anything that could bring the party into disrepute or cost us votes in an election. With sitting MPs, it's a bit of a different scenario, and it's a completely sui generis one with Jeremy Corbyn, because there's a Labour Party member. At the moment, he isn't a Labour MP because he had the whip withdrawn. So we had to look for what process we could use to ensure that all our candidates meet a minimum level. And being found to have broken the Equalities Act by the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, we have been found to have discriminated against, harassed and victimised our own Jewish members. This is serious stuff. The only other political party that ever happened to was the BNP, and we were found to have done that under Jeremy's watch. How would it have worked if he had been a Labour Party candidate at the next general election? It would have been an issue at every press conference. Why is Jeremy Corbyn okay? Well, don't you care about what he did in the past?
OK, and just finally, Luke, we've seen Labour leaders have to deal with this many times before. Neil Kinnock had to try and wrestle with militants. Tony Blair had a clause 4 moment. Is this Keir Starmer's moment where he is showing he has taken back control of the Labour Party?
Well, I think it actually happened a little bit earlier than that. I think the decisive moment in the Labour Party turning round was actually the rule changes that were brought in at the 2021 conference. Remember that the conference that year was really quite finely balanced. It was the kind of final rearguard action of what we could call the hard left or the Corbynites, and they thought they could trip him up, stop him bringing in the rule changes that were required by the EHRC report, and he actually decided to be far bolder than that and bring in a bunch of changes around the way in which we elect our leaders and select our parliamentary candidates, and he put his leadership on the line. I think he would have been in real trouble with that hadn't been passed, and he won that key vote at conference and has really not looked back since then. We've had enough of losing elections. We want decisive leadership, someone that looks like they can run the country in an efficient, capable way and demonstrates the kind of prime minister they would be with the firmness and the good sense that they show as party leader.
You know, there are only 3 Labour leaders who've ever won elections. All of the rest, none of them were sacked in this way. None of them were treated this badly. Unfortunately, what it shows is a level of intolerance of the left, which I think is going to damage the party's electoral prospects.
This is Jon Lansman. He was a central figure in the Corbyn project. A left-wing campaigner for decades, he was behind the influential Momentum movement that propelled their man to the top of the party in 2015.
In 2015, people were desperate for change. And Jeremy looked and sounded like someone who actually believed in what he was saying and was going to do what he was saying. You know, he was genuine. He wasn't like other politicians. He wasn't calculating and, he wasn't a careerist. He wasn't an obvious leader. And that was actually an attraction for people who voted in that election. And above all, they wanted to end austerity. They wanted political change. And, actually the political agenda has changed because, austerity isn't universally accepted as necessary. People understand that we have to, to get out of the economic hole that we're in and to save the planet from self-destruction, we need interventionist government.
So you say he wasn't an obvious leader. I think once he was elected, people maybe did start to see that because he didn't always look that comfortable. What was it that made it difficult for him, do you think?
As leader of the party, you are constantly having to make very difficult decisions. That's always difficult for leaders. I mean, I'm told that, it was very, very hard to make Gordon Brown take decisions, and they had to have a very structured approach to get him to make decisions. Jeremy was better at evading them. And, actually, you need a leader to manage his team. And, the result was that you had infighting in the team, in the leader's office. There wasn't a clear sense of direction. And I think that was reflected in the messaging in the 2019 election, which was a bit all over the place. It was very badly run. And that was down to, a leader that wasn't, driving the team. And, that isn't what Jeremy does, actually. I mean, he's, I think, a very, very principled, very moral, which I think is seen by Labour Party members and people who vote in the leadership elections, very desirable characteristics. They respond emotionally to that, but it isn't probably the most important thing to lots of voters. They want to know what it's going to do for them. And I don't think Jeremy always got his message across.
Have you spoken to Jeremy Corbyn at all in the past few days?
I haven't spoken to him in the past few days, not for many months, actually.
What do you think he should do now?
Well, he's got to make his own decisions. This is a free country. We have a liberal democracy. He can stand as an independent if he wants to. I hope he won't, because I don't think that's what is in the best interests of the left or of the politics that Jeremy Corbyn supports, actually. So, I mean, I understand his loyalty to Islington. He's turned around the very small majority that he had when he was first elected 40 years ago into a very substantial majority. But, I think he would have a much stronger voice as a former Labour leader who was still a Labour Party member than as a solitary backbench MP. And so I think that he should do what Tony Benn did and leave Parliament at the next election to make more time for real politics.
Do you think he would have a chance of winning?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think you can ever take these things for granted. He has got very strong support in the community. I live there. He's seen as being a very good, effective constituency MP. But this is an issue about the future of the party, actually. This isn't about Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy has resigned as leader. He's not going to be leader again. And what we on the left of the Labour Party need to do to advance our thinking and put that into practice, have some hope of putting that into practice, is to have a strategy that will work, for the party as a whole. We all want. I'm sure Jeremy Corbyn wants a Labour government, even if he was elected independent. He's not going to vote to put the Tories in. But we need to work together to get that Labour government, but also to influence its direction so that it does come forward with the policies that we need to resolve our terrible problems.
You don't want to see the left abandon the party because they need to steer it in the right direction, right?
Look, we have a first-past-the-post system. Personally, I'm in favour of proportional representation. So, but when you've got a first-past-the-post system, you've got a two-party system. It's the Tories or Labour. Those are the only real choices of the next election. I want a Labour government, not a Tory government. I want any Labour government. I wanted the Blair government to win too, and I wasn't. I felt much more disillusioned by the policies that Blair was advocating at the early. Of course, I wanted to see a Labour victory.
I think Blair had a chance to get rid of Corbyn, didn't he, and chose not to. It's quite interesting. But there was one more thing I wanted to ask you.
Blair was never as ruthless as Keir Starmer has been. And he was undoubtedly a much more effective Prime Minister. I didn't agree with everything he did, of course. Certainly not going to war in Iraq, but he was a very effective leader. I think Keir has yet to prove himself.
Sometimes I think we very easily forget in politics that politicians are also people. Jeremy Corbyn, How do you think all this will affect him?
Well, I think it is a completely unfair personal attack on him. The truth is he didn't really want to be leader, He didn't expect to be leader. No one did. If people had thought that he might become leader, he wouldn't have got on the ballot paper. He had a gruelling 5 years as leader. It was very, very challenging for him. I felt for him personally through that. It wasn't really what he wanted to do. And he didn't have all of the qualities that you need to be a leader of the Labour Party or Prime Minister. I mean, no one has all of them. But to kick, it feels like he's being kicked when he's down. He lost the election. He has to live with that. To kick him when he's down is just indefensible.
He may be down, but he's certainly not out yet. Still with huge numbers of loyal supporters, they're keen to see what Jeremy Corbyn will do next. As for Keir Starmer, he'll be hoping this newfound ruthlessness will be enough to get him into number 10. My thanks to Jon Lansman and to Luke Akehurst, and to you for listening to the Sky News Daily, with me, Liz Bates. This episode was produced by Rosie Gillett. Our editor was Philly Beaumont.